All right, welcome to episode 61 of The Sedated Man. The title of this one is Bad News Isn't Always Bad. It's an interview with Ken Rupert, and I want every one of you dudes to listen up because when scripture talks about tenacity, when it talks about stepping up, this guy has more than done it, and he's got the attitude that I really, really appreciate in men. So, without further ado, Ken, thanks for being on. I really appreciate you coming.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad you have me. I think it's time to get real, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. What I really appreciate about Ken is Ken reached out to me to be on the show, and I'm glad that he did, especially once you hear his story. But a lot of people probably don't know who you are. So why don't you give us your background and, what brought you to kind of your current passion?
So I've been working in telecommunications industry for quite a while actually. I started with Verizon and did 21 years there. And in 2001, my son was born. And, the birth of a child is always an exciting time, but for us, it became a very trauma time, right? And in that process, I've been laid off 3 times, finally got back into telecommunications. But when he was born, we realized there were problems right away, and we didn't bury our heads in the sand. So many people live in denial. So many people will see the obvious right in front of them, and they won't acknowledge it. And we acknowledged right away that there was a birth trauma. There was some complications to the whole situation, and before he was born, I'd actually started a college fund. My thing was I'm a big Ohio State fan. I never had the opportunity to go to Ohio State. As a matter of fact, I had to work my way through college at a local college, and I was going to set aside money and make sure my child made it to Ohio State, just so I could, vicariously live through him. That was the idea, I guess. And after he was born, we realized very quickly that college was not going to be in his future. As a matter of fact, we didn't even know that school would be in his future. We didn't know how that was going to turn out. So I pivoted. I hit a pivot moment, and we all have them. Most of us experience minor pivot moments where we have to make a decision and we go one direction, realizing that we're going to give up the opportunity to go another direction. But I was forced into it, and I realized that we were probably going to need to care for his needs a long time, and not just while he was living underneath of our roof. We realized that was probably going to be a lifelong journey with us, but beyond our years. And so I pivoted and changed that college fund into a trust, and realized that I was going to need to provide for his needs probably some 40 or 50 years beyond my life, because even though he has disabilities, he has a rare genetic disorder, the bottom line is he's going to have a normal lifespan. Mm-hmm. And nobody's going to care for our children the way we care for them.
No.
And it's hard to live with that every day, realizing that, the person that is going to be paid for his care is not going to have the same kind of passion to make sure that he's taken care of. So I figured the only thing I could do is really build the financial resources that would at least provide for a comfortable setting where he wouldn't be awarded the state, where he wouldn't be passed around through the different organizations, that we could eventually settle on a place where we could get him care and have a trust set up for him that would just constantly pay for him. And we had to come up with a number, and I had to come up with, how am I going to do that? I mean, I'm not a finance major. I was a business major.
Right.
But I'm also very, very analytical. So in the process, I just started to study the billionaires. Because to me, I wanted to know how they became a billionaire. I may never be a billionaire, but I needed to have I needed to be a multimillionaire in order to make sure that his care was going to be there for the rest of his life. And so I studied, and I started learning, and I started doing trading, and I got very involved in the markets, and I developed strategies on how I was going to put money aside. We changed our lifestyle. We knew that getting out of debt was going to be the key, so we had to pay off our house. And all of these things were in a series over the last 18 years of building up these different strategies and these different milestones to achieve. And, in the process, unfortunately, what I realized was I was also sacrificing my health in the process. So I wasn't paying attention to myself. I was so focused on making sure that he had financial resources. And I had gained I was almost 300 pounds. I was 299 at my biggest. And I realized I needed to do something. So after a second layoff, I was in a dead end job. I knew I had to find something different. But in the meantime, I had to get back to physically taking care of myself. And back in the 80s, I used to do martial arts. After I got out of the military, I started doing martial arts. And I stopped doing it for 27 years. And so I called up a karate studio in the local town. I said, hey, do you got an adult program? What's it like? Wasn't interested in earning a black belt. Really didn't care about belting. I didn't even care if I ever tested. I just wanted to go do something with other people because, one of the side effects, the residual effects, the collateral damage of being a parent of special needs child is you just don't have friends.
Yeah.
So I needed to get involved with somebody or a group that was doing the same thing I was doing, and we could do it together. And martial arts was a perfect fit for that.
Mm-hmm.
And after I got there, and of course they do advance you. They give you curriculum, you learn it,
Yep.
and then they test you and they move you on. So I still wasn't really necessarily interested in earning a black belt. My whole thing was I just wanted to kind of regain the discipline that I had lost from a physical point of view. Well, since I've joined, I've dropped 72 pounds.
Oh,
And
that's
and
substantial.
yeah, but that's because I gained that discipline back of how to say no when I needed to say no.
Mm-hmm.
From a financial point of view, it was easy to say no. I had a huge motivator, and my why gets bigger every day because he gets older and I get older. So my why is continually growing, but I had to find that discipline. I had to get that physical discipline back. And it wasn't too long before I started realizing that everything I've been doing on a financial sense, the milestones, the discipline, the strategies, the execution of one priority to another, the growth of those priorities, how the synergies are built between them, was exactly like martial arts training. I mean, it was the exact same thing, right? Every belt level, you're learning a technique, and then the next belt level, you learn to apply it differently. But you're still applying the same foundational technique, but you're doing it in a way that's more effective and more efficient. Mm-hmm. And so I basically started putting together these different financial milestones in a logical progression and matched them up with the belt structure of martial arts and the discipline. And that's how I got to where I am today, where I've just developed this process called the financial self-defense training. And it will move somebody. By the time they get to first degree black belt, they're a millionaire.
Oh, wow. That's a substantial step for a first belt.
Yeah. Well, the first belt is white belt, right? So you start off.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So how many belts are in your system there?
It goes white, yellow, orange, green, blue, purple, brown senior, red senior, red, black.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah. So 13 belts, but then you can go all the way up to 9th degree black belt, which by that time you're a decamillionaire.
Oh, wow. Well, there's nothing wrong with that word either. We can use that word. Just a side note right quick. Earlier this week, or last week, I should say, I interviewed Myron Golden, and we talked about him a little bit. Mm-hmm. He also has a positive wealth mindset, and I think too many guys. I mean, you had this substantial, what most people call stumbling block when you ended up with a special needs son. Now, you love him like you would love any other. You want the best for him like you would any other. But you made a decision to move forward in a manner that was going to provide for him well after you were gone. Whereas I feel like most men today, because they've been programmed by culture and society, figure that they're going to have to plug their kids into a system because they feel that's all that's available to them. And you were like, no, this is my son. He will not be part of the system. He's going to be taken care of because that's my responsibility. Okay. Now, scripturally, it says that you're supposed to leave a legacy for your kids. And that's exactly what you're trying to do. And that legacy isn't just financial, I don't think, but financial does have a lot to do with it. So so as a result, you've written many books. Uh, I saw what, like 10?
Yeah, I think there's 12 or something like
12.
that.
Oh, just, yeah, a few trifles,
Just a few more.
just a few more. But you are obviously very convicted about it. I mean, as the father of a disabled, disabled kid, what would you say to a father now who is, and I'm sure you've had to say it, but what do you say to a father who is just recently found out his son is disabled, and now all of the things he planned on doing when his kids left the house are moot? What do you say to that guy?
Yeah, you have to kind of look beyond the pain
Hmm.
to find the blessing. It's very difficult. The reality is that, I know a lot of single mothers of special needs children.
Hmm.
And the reason why my wife and I know that is because a lot of times the guy checks out.
Yeah.
There's a very interesting dichotomy dichotomy between the sexes when it comes to this. Women tend to overcommit when they have a child with special needs, and men tend to withdraw.
Very
And
well
those
said.
two are not very good,
No.
right? So as a man, you just got to kind of step it up and say, I'm committed to this. My wife and I have had this conversation many times. That a lot of times you have to be more committed to the concept of marriage than the person you're married to, because the struggles can get so great that they can drive a wedge.
Yeah.
And you've just got to step up and say, right now, my spouse probably doesn't like me very much. And based on what we're struggling with, I don't really like her very much, but
Yeah.
we're committed to this, and we're going to stay there. That's what I think. I think that's what we're called to do,
Yeah.
is to stay the course until you can find. And my wife and I have gone through a lot of times where we sit in the same room together, and neither one of us are there.
Yeah.
That just happens, and it probably magnified when both of you are feeling the same way and thinking about the same things. When you're thinking about, who's going to take care of him, what's that going to look like? Are they going to care for his physical needs? Are they going to care for his emotional needs? All those questions go through your mind. And it is. It's. I would tell the guy, hey, look, no matter what, this is the task you've been given,
Hmm.
and you can't run from it. You just can't run from it. It's not what you're called to do.
No, we live in a huge, I think, non-commitment culture where if things don't work out, you just move on. If things don't work out, you just move on. And but wedding vows haven't changed, for better or for worse.
Mm-mm.
Better or for worse.
Mm-mm.
My wife and I chose from the get-go. I mean, we actually had the conversation. We were both prior divorced, and we had the conversation before we got married. Divorce is not an option. It will never come up. We will work through whatever comes our way. And we've had a lot of struggles too. Now we haven't had um, disabled children, but we have had our own struggles and we've worked through them. And basically that's what you and your wife have done. And I totally get what you're saying, that look, we're more committed. It's more, you know, you've chosen to make that marriage work, not because you're roommates, but because you committed, because it's important.
Yeah.
Because if you don't see, especially in your situation, if you don't see each other as your best friends or as having each other's backs, that kid has no chance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, you're giving your son the gift of a strong marriage.
Yeah. And it's not his fault that he's disabled.
No.
I think that's the thing. So I was talking to an older lady whose husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't like the idea that she had to take care of him now.
Yeah.
And, for us, I think that people don't understand and appreciate the lag time that happens from a physical point of view to an emotional, intellectual point of view. So when my son was born, we instantly became caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
And physically, in a split second, we were caregivers. It took a while for our intellectual being and our spiritual being and our emotional being to catch up with that.
Right.
There was anger, there was disappointment. There was shaking our fist at God. How could you do this? This is our first child,
Right.
And Daniel's our only child. It's like having 3 children. So it's like, okay, we've got an entire family now.
Yep.
The care needs are there, and it's going to be like that. But I think that once a guy can kind of get to that point where intellectually and spiritually and emotionally he catches up, it's hard. There's some of the conversations I had with my son where it's extremely difficult. I was at a pitch competition, pitching the financial self-defense training, and I got to the point where I brought him up on stage. And before I actually did that, the idea was I was going to walk over to the edge of the stage, sit down, have him stand up and stand next to me, and then talk about my why.
Right.
Talk about my how, and I actually said underneath my voice, but of course it was on mic, I said, this is the hard part. Because I know that, when you look at him, he's got such a great spirit. I mean, he's taught me more about my walk with the Lord than I've ever taught him.
Mm-hmm.
He's just got that kind of spirit. That's where, my book Empathy came from, was understanding how to become a servant. What does it mean to be a servant? And what example does the Bible give us for being a servant? And I mean, when you think about it, it's very simple. Christ left his position in glory, entered into the world of man, the experience of man,
yep.
and provided a path of restoration. Well, there's your servant, right? We got to set aside our priorities, enter into the life of somebody else who's struggling, and establish a path of restoration. Mm-hmm. Now, with my son, restoration is ultimately when he meets his Lord.
Right.
All right. I'm not going to give him that, but I can provide the environment in which he can thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is the key. That's what kind of got me to where I am, is I'm trying to provide the environment, mostly from a financial point of view, but definitely from an emotional point of view, definitely from an intellectual point of view, as much as I can, because intellectually he's compromised, emotionally he's compromised,
mm-hmm.
and so I've got to fill in those gaps. And I think my wife does a tremendous job, far better than I do. I still do have that mindset of, hey, he's a teenager now. Let him sit in the other room and do what he wants to do. But every now and then he'll call out and he'll say, can you come be with your buddy? And he just wants me to be in the room. And I'll sit there and I'm like, do you want to talk? No, just wants to listen to his music on his computer, but he just wants me. He wants my presence.
He wants you there.
Yeah. He wants to know that Daddy's there. And on the nights that I go to karate, he actually gets upset because when I go out, I'm gone for an hour and a half, and we always pray before he goes to bed. But on those nights, I'm out a little bit later. So he goes to bed, then he falls asleep. Now, if I come home and he's still awake, I'll go into his bedroom and we'll pray before he goes to bed, before he goes to sleep. But he doesn't like those nights. And I've actually had to spend time away from the home on a business trip. And my wife will call me right before he goes to bed, and he'll pray over the phone with me, because that means that much to him.
Right.
So it's just about providing the environment, right?
Yeah.
And part of that's it's on all levels. It's intellectual, it's emotional, it's spiritual, and it's definitely financial and physical. So that's what I think we're called to do, and it's kind of that's been my journey right now.
Right. So what's your since we're somewhat on the subject, what's your opinion about what Scripture has to say about wealth then? Because you teach wealth, correct? Yeah. And you teach wealth because you were put in a position where you felt that was the direction you had to go. Like I said, a lot of guys feel like they have to plug into the system. And this is what I think is a huge problem, is too many. I mean, here we have a non-commitment culture, but on top of that, we've got a complacent culture where men are constantly under attack for their masculinity, for their faith, you name it, men are under attack.
Yeah.
And so they've got this step back mentality, or this is as good as it's ever going to get. You took a different path. You chose to pursue wealth for necessity, but also for your son's comfort, really. You didn't want life to be any harder for him than it had to be, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm assuming that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But what do you think from a scriptural standpoint is Scripture stand on wealth?
Well, so let's take it from the point of view, first of all, that understanding what wealth really is, right? Because we kind of got this romantic concept of if I'm rich, I'm happy and all this other stuff. And
Yeah, Lamborghinis and Ferraris, baby.
Yeah. So wealth is nothing more than a medium of exchange,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the fact of the matter is that people pursue wealth for for reasons that are not necessarily honorable,
Yes.
and they pursue it in non-honorable ways. I believe that, if good people don't have wealth, who has wealth? Bad people.
Yeah.
What are bad people going to do with wealth? They're going to do bad things.
Right.
Right. If you take $1 million and you give it to somebody who's addicted to drugs, you know where that wealth is going to go.
Right.
So wealth is nothing more than a tool. I try to tell people this all the time with careers and jobs and stuff like that. These are tools that we have in our experience, and wealth is going to allow us to do good things.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm able to build enough wealth where there's money left over after my son passes away, I want to have it written in his trust that good things happen with that wealth.
Yeah.
And my plan is the number that I've chosen as the target, because to me, like, my retirement and his care is not an age, it is a target. It's a number.
Right.
And I think that scripturally speaking, as long as we keep it in context, that wealth is a tool. Jesus talked about it a lot,
Mm-hmm.
because it's what we relate to.
Right.
It's a medium of exchange. Before they found a lot of silver in South America back in the 1300s or something like that.
Yeah.
The medium of exchange was just bartering. It was like, hey, I've got this, how much is a fox skin worth to you and I today?
No,
it's not worth that much.
Yeah.
But a piece of silver, piece of gold, it's funny, a piece of money, a piece of paper that has a number put on it and some pretty colors, that means something, and it's all fiat currency when you think about it. What is it backed by?
Nothing.
It's not backed by gold.
The market,
and
whatever the market says it's backed by. Yeah.
Yeah. It's ironic. I think about this, I used to be a coin collector, and you think about it, people take paper money that's worth nothing and exchange it for gold. Well, what does that make the gold worth? Nothing, because in order to get, you can't,
Yeah.
you could spend gold, but it just doesn't make sense. So anyway, But I digress on that.
That's okay. Yeah. No, I get you.
But getting back to it, I think that I don't think there's anything scripturally wrong. I think the love, and we hear this all the time, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil.
Right.
It's where we put our passion. It's where we put our trust. It's where we put our faith. If we put our faith in our money, it's bound to let us down. So you got to keep it in perspective. Wealth, money, assets, the medium of exchange to provide for our physical needs here on earth.
Mm-hmm.
It has got nothing to do, the old classic, I think it was Dave Ramsey had mentioned it. He picked up a brick and he said, this brick is amoral. You could build a hospital with this brick, or you could throw it through a window. It's not the brick that's got the bad attitude. It's the person. So if you've got the right attitude and you understand it's a medium of exchange, I think, it's a positive thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
No, that's excellent.
Good.
No, it is. I mean,
pass that test.
What's that?
I said I passed that test.
Oh, no, not a test. I think, I think there is a really negative view because, the media paints rich people as these evil, money grubbing, and that's not true. I mean, look at scripture. Job was wealthy. I mean, there's a whole ton of people that everybody will look to. Everybody likes to talk about David and what a strong man he was and everything. Wealthy. Everybody likes to talk about Job's trials, wealthy. People forget, look, the Lord blessed them with wealth. They weren't money grubbing. They weren't evil, but the media has completely painted a different picture where you have to be mediocre in order to be pious, in order to be godly. And there's nothing in scripture that says that you got to be this mediocre. Mediocrity and average is not in scripture. So, but I digress there. So, okay. So, where are we at? I lost track of my questions here. So what does every day look like for you and your son then? I mean, you gave us a little bit when you were talking about, uh, going to karate and how he doesn't like that, but what would an average day look like?
Well, right now he's finishing up his senior year in school.
And that's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, we've always tried to push him to have at least one normal class. He has what they call LFI, Living for Independence, where
Mhm.
it teaches them basic independent skills. They'll cook, they'll do math, they'll kind of work with money. Right now, they're going through the whole process of um, learning a checking account and stuff. So, I was able to take him down to the bank and actually open up a checking account in his name and kind of show him how that process works and stuff. But the average day is, quite honestly, I mean, he's physically disabled.
Right.
So every morning we got to get up and clean him up.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's one thing when you're cleaning up a baby. It's a different thing when you're cleaning up an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
And so you clean him up, get him ready for his day, get him dressed. We, give him breakfast. And then
Yeah.
daddy goes off to work. And he goes off to school. Mama takes him to school. And when he comes home, he pretty much, he loves to watch bluegrass videos. I don't know where that came from because my wife and I are not necessarily bluegrass fans. And that's a great story. If I don't want to digress on it because it's a long story. We followed this bluegrass band for 11 years and they adopted him and he just became their fan. So,
That's
but
awesome.
he loves to watch fiddle videos. And so he'll spend several hours a day watching fiddle videos. And, we try to engage him in different activities. We have to do physical therapy with him. So that's part of the process. Sometimes it's just walking therapy. He uses a walker around the house. We have a transport chair. So when we take him out, we're going to go long distances. We put him in the transport chair and this facilitates us moving him quicker from one
Right.
place to another. He has a lot of high anxiety. So there's this constant repetition of questions about, is it going to rain tonight? What's daddy going to do? Is daddy going to karate? What are we having for dinner? You can tell him several times and it's like it doesn't sink in the answers to these things.
Right.
It's a constant dance of trying to address his anxieties, but not in a way that's enabling. And that's a really difficult dance to do because you want to reassure him that things are not going to be upsetting in his world. I mean, here's a child that's been, laid on a cold metal operating table 11 times.
Right.
And several of those times were more serious than others. But it's a dance. It's a constant dance throughout the day to make sure that you're not enabling him to be anxious, but you're addressing his anxiety so he doesn't feel like mommy and daddy don't care.
Right. Yeah.
And it's very interesting. Teens are like this. He's different when he's around different people and he's not around mommy and daddy. And I think that's just the nature of the beast. There is a level of enabling that goes on at home, in any home.
Right.
I think because we love our kids and because we want the best for our kids and because we want to try to drive them to certain behaviors, we reward certain things that they do, hoping that will encourage them to continue to do good things, but then they become dependent upon that reward.
Yeah.
And, that's just the dynamics of a family. But when he gets out and he's in school, he's kind of different. We hear things from school and he doesn't communicate well. So we have to constantly try to draw out of him, like, what did you do in school today? And then we have to kind of lead him in the conversation because he's not very conversational.
Right.
It's not that he doesn't want to be. It's just that he can't be. He doesn't process the world the same way we do. So we have to try to enter into his world and try to process the world that way. That's a typical day. It's a dance. It's a dance of meeting his needs and at the same time trying to encourage him to be as independent as possible.
Oh, that's awesome. It's interesting you were talking about, enabling. Just as a side note, when I was younger, my kids were younger because I have 5 sons, but one of their friends, his dad would pay him for his grades. And I told him, I said, that's a bad plan. And he said, well, no, I want him to do well in school. I want him to understand that you have to do well at a job. And if he's working hard, he'll be paid well, like a job. And I said, I understand your logic, But I'm telling you right now, all you're teaching that kid is that there is a dollar attached to everything he does.
Yes.
Eventually he won't do anything unless you attach a dollar to it. And he's like, no, 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 no. And sure enough, man, that kid will not give. And he's an adult. The kid's an adult now. He won't do anything that doesn't have a dollar attached to it.
Yeah.
So, but you're absolutely right. Everybody wants their kids to do well. And
Sure.
I would imagine that feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that feeling is even more amplified with a disabled kid.
Yeah. I think there's a natural desire we have to fight against this. My wife and I have many conversations about trying to fit him into our world.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to come there. It
Right.
just is not going to happen. And you can't make the world adjust to his world. So you understand that your circle of friends gets smaller and smaller. I've often said it's like we have two worlds. We have the world that my wife and I live in, and inside that world is a smaller world that we actually live in, right? So we exist in this big world where we have to work and we have to, be responsible and all this other stuff. And then there's this smaller world within that's where we actually live.
Right.
The difference with these two worlds is one world, if you picture the earth is spinning in one direction, and our world is spinning in the opposite direction. And a lot of times we're going cross culture.
Yep.
Or we're going, contrarian, because we have to think differently. And so it's hard to make friends. It's hard to get those kind of connections because people don't look at it and say, wow, your world's going in a different direction. And I want to kind of catch up to that. And the world's spinning very fast and our world's spinning very slow in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So everything is kind of, it takes you off kilter. But, ROI is not a bad thing.
No.
But when you teach a child that everything is turned to ROI, that's a bad thing. I agree with you. That's not the kind of message you want to give. You want to give your kid, yes, you work hard. And there's sometimes you just work hard because it's the right thing to do. And not because there's a dollar attached to it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because at the end, I've told my boys, look, at the end of the day, the only person I can account to God for is me.
Yep.
And I have to know that I did everything I could, regardless of how the other person reacted, how the other situation turned out. It doesn't matter. I have to be able to say, I could stand before God and say, I did what I thought I should do, because, to him who
much is given.
Well, no, to him who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin.
Yes.
So, so the right thing, granted, there's a little bit of flexibility there between people, but I have to know that at the end of the day, I did the right thing regardless. And, and that's what you want to teach your kids. But so those two worlds you're talking about end up becoming one world. So within your house, you create another world entirely, do you not?
I would think so. Yeah. I think you do what you have to do. And, it's hard. It's hard for me as a man to have to really get to that level of connecting with my son on an emotional level. You think guys, we go out and we yuck it up and I could take him fishing or play sports with him or something like that. And my reality is that's not going to happen.
Right.
My reality is where I need to meet my son on an emotional level is that he's scared. Mm-hmm. And to him, the world is a scary place.
Yeah.
Even though, here I am, martial artist, I often say they teach you 13 techniques. And then if you picture a face of a clock, you got 12 different positions on that clock. So now I can break you 13 times 12. But if you take it, technically you have 60 seconds, so I can break you 13 times 12 times 60. So how many times is that? How many different ways can I break a person?
Yeah.
And all that ability and knowledge and skill and efficiency and effectiveness goes right out the window.
Yep.
Because I can't, not that I want to break my son. That's not what I'm trying to communicate.
No, I know what you're saying. I know what you mean.
But the ability to do those kinds of things that dads normally do with their kids to make that connection, go watch his games or participate, take him out on the field and teach him how to hit a golf ball or something like that. I mean, that's just not there. Right. And so the only way I can connect with him on an emotional level is to build that strength of character, to build that strength of that sense that Daddy's got my back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure he doesn't look at the world that way. Like, he's never looked at me and says, Daddy's got my back. It's funny. He'll say, I love mama because mama cares for me. All right. Why do you love daddy? It's kind of one of those things where, can you tell me why you love me?
So the male part is still in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell you, Dad. I'm going to let you guess.
He's still a dude.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, deep down inside, he's still a kid. He's still a teenager. He's still all those things, but he just has huge mountains that he has to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And he needs somebody to journey along with him. And he'll always need somebody to journey along with him. So to whatever extent I can get in there into that little head of his and give him a memory so that when I do die, he can say, I remember Daddy because he did this or he did that, or those are the things. And occasionally you get a glimpse of that. Every now and then God takes us on the other side of our struggles, and he allows us to peer in the window.
Yeah.
And he allows us to see the effect that we have, even though we're going through these struggles. Like, these struggles are designed to take us to a place that we normally wouldn't naturally go. And occasionally he gives me an opportunity to look inside that window and kind of tell me, you got him now, and I'm helping you with him, right? I'm giving you the intelligence to build the finances that you need to feel like you've prepared and provided for him.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, he's mine. Just keep that in mind, right?
Right.
You have him now, but he's ultimately mine. And the only way I can stay sane is to realize that I'm not accountable for his care once I pass away. So I've got to stop thinking about that, because that's an ever-present pressure. That's what I call a static stress. It's always there. I'm always thinking, oh my God, what's it going to be like for him? He's not going to have me, Yeah. And I've got to figure out a way to make that break and that separate. And some of that is that natural separation that happens with teenagers. They naturally rail against their parents and kind of go their own way. He's not going through that. So I've got to figure out a way kind of to push him out there and leave him somewhat vulnerable, trusting that God's got him, because ultimately he belongs to God. He doesn't belong to me.
Right.
And that's a tough struggle as a man to have to face, because, most people are like, they can teach your kids to be strong and that typical male presence,
Yeah.
I can't teach them that. I have to trust the Lord will take care of them in situations where I can't be there.
Yeah.
And that's a different kind of stress.
A lot of men don't realize, and I've told my wife and I have done counseling with other couples many, many times over the years. The one thing I always remind them of is, look, out of all of human history, from Adam all the way to the end, God said that you were the only one to parent this child or children. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That there was nobody else more qualified out of all the people ever born to have these kids, to raise these kids, to protect these kids, to teach these kids. And in your case, you were the perfect guy for your son. And he knew that, but God also knew that you would recognize that you are really a steward of your son.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew you would give your whole heart in that respect. And so that's to be highly commended, but you took ownership. You absolutely took ownership. And I appreciate that.
When you mentioned that God said that, you're the only qualified person, I'd like to see what resume he was looking at.
However, luckily he's got a big book of resumes that we don't have
bigger
access
resume
to.
than I got.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But obviously he's looking at some fine print. I'm like the same way. I'm like, God, you must have some fine print on there that I just don't see. I don't know. So.
And I think that's a healthy position to be in, is to realize that you're not equipped for everything.
No.
But when you need to be equipped, he's right there. He's going to equip you for that moment.
Exactly.
So one of the hardest things I ever had to do was lay my son on an operating table for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I have to talk about these things, because each time I talk about them, it gets a little bit easier.
Yeah, no,
to talk about it and kind of draw, to kind of bring people in so they can understand what it's like. But the doctor said, you can come back. One of you two can come back. And I told my wife, I said, I'll go back. This was for his first surgery. And the doctor's like, why don't you go ahead and put him to sleep? Because he's going to be a little bit more comfortable, I guess, with you. And I'm like, my son didn't have a clue as to what was coming. We told him we were going to get his legs fixed, because basically they had to go in and cut the femur and derotate his leg, and then he would be in this brace and everything. And I walked back there, and I thought, I'm prepared for this, man. This is, I can do this. This is going to be good. I'm going to be there for him. He's going to know that I'm his dad.
Got this.
Yeah. So get the mask. Right? I'm going to use my mouth as the mask. And I went to put it over his mouth, and he starts saying, I need daddy. I need daddy. I need daddy. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm right here, buddy. I kept saying, I'm right here. As I came closer to his mask, I said, you're just going to feel a little air on your face, and then you'll go to sleep and everything will be okay. Right before I put that mask on his face, he screamed out, I need mama. And at that moment, I realized daddy's not always going to be here to protect you. Yeah. And daddy's not always going to be able to protect you from the bad things that are going to happen to you in your life. Mm-hmm. And that's one of those pivot points where you realize that, wow, I've really got to pray hard for him, because I got to make sure that God always puts good people in his path.
Yeah.
Because if God considers me a good person, I'm not always going to be there for him. He's going to need somebody else that's got that same level of care, that same level of connection, that same level of empathy to understand what he's going through in order to be able to provide for him. Absolutely. Because, our wills don't have anybody in it as caretakers. We really don't have a large extended family that can care for him. I mean, my dad's got Alzheimer's, and my mom's in her 80s, and she's had cancer. And so there's nothing that can happen on that end. And I've got two brothers, but neither one of them are in a position to care for him. Right. And, especially because they don't interact daily. They don't understand his struggles. Right. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, wow, I just got to keep praying that God's going to put the right people in his path when he needs them, because I'm not always going to be there.
And then trust that he will.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because otherwise that stress will just kill me. And it was, because I was eating myself to death.
Yeah.
No,
so. I understand that. I've struggled with basically it's food addiction, A lot of people, just a side note, a lot of people don't realize that if you have a coffee addiction, you quit buying coffee. If you have a cocaine addiction, you eliminate cocaine. If you have, but when you have trouble with food, you can't just remove it. It doesn't just go away. So yeah, that's
exactly.
Very real. Very, very real. Okay.
It's an acceptable drug.
Yeah, exactly. Because your body's got to have it. What are you going to do?
Yeah,
exactly. And then it involves self-control that you didn't realize you had to have, and I go, oh no, I just need to knuckle down. And then it becomes a focus. So no, I totally get it. I mean, guys don't get up to 299 by accident.
No.
I mean, although it's passive as it happens, it's intentional at the same time, because you know every time you're eating that you probably shouldn't be eating it.
Exactly.
But what do you do? But when you're struggling, when you've got all these other things on your plate, and that's what a lot of men, I think, are turning. They're turning to. I've often said, drugs, alcohol, and pornography; those are the low-hanging fruit. What about the guys who sedate with video games or Netflix or food, or take your pick. There's a gazillion more fruit on that tree other than the ones that are just barely touching the ground. So
yeah.
All right. So just real quick before we go, 12 books. You wrote 12 books. What inspired 12 books, Ken?
So I had started off trying to be a life coach. I had did a lot of life coach training, got certified as a master Christian life coach, and was wanting to help people. My real passion ultimately is to help people.
Absolutely.
I understand what struggle is. I've lived it every day for a long time. And so I wanted to help people. And old friend of mine, I was meeting with him over lunch, ironically, right? We were talking about food. And he said, if you really want to be an expert in something, write a book. And I've always loved writing. I used to write poetry back as early as like 15, 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Edgar Allan Poe. For some reason, he just had something that I connected with at that time in my life. And the two books that I have out that are literally my poetry books are written when I was in the military and shortly after I came out of the military. And you can see the transition of a person who was struggling with life, who met his soon-to-be future wife, and the transition that happens in the mindset of a person. And it's like a little sociological study to go back and look at those books and go, wow, I was here and then I was here, and think of all the things I've been through.
Right.
So writing's always been a passion of mine, and helping others is another passion of mine. And so I want to use the pain that I've felt, the struggles that I've been through, where I am today, to give people an opportunity to say, I want to be different.
Mm-hmm.
I have a book out there called The Change Quotient, which is a workbook type book that literally walks a person through discovery, self-discovery. Understand why you do what you do. Mm-hmm. Because when you understand the drivers and the motivators behind something, you can then change the outcome because you change the drivers. So often we're so focused on changing the outcome that we don't think about, we want to focus, how do I change this outcome? How do I change? Just understand what's driving it. The reason why I've written the self-defense guide, the financial self-defense guide, is because it gives people a real practical process of taking you from being debt dependent, of taking you of being financially stressed, taking you from living paycheck to paycheck, and gives you a process that, if executed in order, will bring you out and change the total trajectory of your life. Mm-hmm. I tell people, when you get rid of consumer debt, it's amazing how much your life changes. And then when you finally pay off your house, you have so many more options open to you. But building wealth is not about keeping it. Building wealth is learning how to use it to do good in the world.
Yeah.
Too many people, and there's billionaires on both sides, right? You got billionaires who use wealth in a bad way.
Yeah.
I won't mention his name, but there's one out there that does that. And then you have billionaires that use it in a positive way. And then there's that blended billionaire that uses it in a way that appears positive, but ultimately is a negative effect on life.
Right.
So I won't go into that because that's like a whole nother podcast. But I've studied these billionaires because when a billionaire does something, you want to pay attention to it. When it comes to finances, right? I do follow and read a lot about Carl Icahn because, to me, he's an activist investor, and I'm going to learn a lot of tricks from him. Mm-hmm. You read about Warren Buffett because he uses merger and acquisition arbitrage, and that's a really powerful way of building wealth. I taught myself how to trade options, and then I've studied how to the different ways to put option trading together to make significant amount of money.
Right.
And that's all designed. Why? Because of my driver. My driver, my motivator is my son. Mm-hmm. I have to think about his care. That's my main focus. And that's really the key, is when you understand your drivers and motivators, you'll understand how to change your outcomes. And we can change those for good or bad. I understand that eating was not the right way to go. It was lack of self-discipline. It was lack of focus. And, I changed the drivers, and now I've been able to lose the weight and keep it off. So I think that's understand your drivers and motivators, change those to change your life. That's really why I write. Then there's some spiritual books out there that I had that kind of go through, as I say, the empathy is the one that was motivated by my son, learning how to become a servant. Mm-hmm. The book called The Plan is a full-size book and that one is really about, it takes empathy and puts it on steroids. It really talks about how to enter, not just like my motivator is my son, but when I see somebody else struggling, I want to get to know that person. It all starts with a relationship, and relationship is a combination of time spent with somebody, both good quality time and quantity of time.
Right.
It's also shared experiences, and it's also a common purpose. So I was reading an article in the paper that this one guy had written about, and his daughter was dying of cancer. And I told my wife, I said, I want to get to know him. So I contacted the paper, got his contact information, contacted him, said, hey, I'd like to get together with you for lunch. For no other reason than just getting to know him. I
Right.
wanted to start building a relationship with him. Well, all these years later now, he and I are very close. His daughter did pass away, but I walk with him every day. And, he struggles every day with the fact that he lost his daughter.
Yeah.
And he needs somebody that understands that kind of concept of loss, it's not judgmental. And that's what the plan does. It talks about walking alongside of somebody. And in order to walk alongside of somebody, you got to put aside the judgment, because it's easy for us to say, well, that person's struggling. Well, if they just did this, it would be okay.
Yeah.
As men, we got to get that out of our minds. We got to quit trying to fix people and just want to walk alongside of them.
Yeah.
And so now we've been probably since 2014, I think we met. And since then, we've been for 5 years now. We get along great, go out, talk. There's times where we talk about his daughter. There's times we talk about my son. He's helped me put together some videos for the Financial Black Belt. He's just an all-around good guy, but I needed to know where his struggle was. I needed to understand him. I needed to get to build a relationship with him before I ever qualified to be able to talk to him about his daughter and about that whole situation. And he's one that's kind of lost his faith because of it. He was actually, preaching at his dad's church. And he was thinking about the whole story of Job and the whole concept of, you get this pain and then there's this loss, and how do you explain it? And he says, he told me, he goes, I just can't be Job. I can't come back from this. But my constant walking alongside of him has given him encouragement. I work on what I call the men's principle, the men's network,
right?
Mentoring, encouraging, nurturing, and strengthening. So when I walk alongside of somebody who's struggling, I use that concept. There's times when you're going to mentor, there's times where you're going to encourage, there's times where you're going to nurture, and there's times where you're going to strengthen. And that's kind of a concept that's built into the whole concept of the book of the plan. That's where that kind of that takes you.
Right.
And then of course there's, I want to build people up financially and let them know that you can do this. It looks overwhelming. Most of our financial wounds are self-inflicted. Mine wasn't self-inflicted. Mine wasn't self-inflicted. Mine was inflicted on me, right?
Right.
I had incredible need now to provide for somebody. I don't know what the economy is going to be like 40 years from now, 40 years beyond my death, but I got to anticipate it and plan for it. And, so it's all about encouraging. I write to take my pain and turn it into mentoring others, encouraging others, nurturing others, and strengthening others. That's why I write.
That's excellent. All right, Ken. So where can people find you?
Well,
make your plug, man.
Make my plug. So my plug is, first of all, I always try to drive traffic to the website. It's not an e-commerce website, but it's an informational website. It's called financialblackbelt.us. Make sure it's US, because there is another one out there, financialblackbelt.com, that is not mine. Let's just say
I saw that one.
Yeah. Say financialblackbelt.us. I'm on Amazon, so they can go there and certainly look for my my author's page, which covers everything. And obviously they can email me. They can go to the website and contact me. I respond to anything. If people have questions, if they want to know how they can learn more about the Financial Black Belt, certainly contact me through the website. If they want to talk about any of my other books, if they go out and let's say they go out and they buy the plan and they really want to understand and learn more about walking alongside of others who are struggling, still go to the website, shoot me an email, we'll connect, and I can answer any questions that way. I hesitate to give out my phone number because, Don't.
don't give it out. That's the only line I'm going to draw here.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so the website's the best way to get a hold of me, and then we'll just communicate through email after that.
All right, cool. Well, just so everybody that's listening knows, my show notes will be on patreon.com/thesedatedman, and I'll have links to Ken's books on Amazon. I'll have links to his website. Ken does not have a podcast, but we talked about him starting one and probably the need for it. Hint, hint.
Yeah.
So all the contact info for Ken will be on my Patreon page. So Ken, I want to thank you for coming today. And if anybody here is watching and wants to hear the podcast again, you can find us on Anchor.fm, iTunes, Pocket Cast, Overcast, Radio Public, Castbox, Breaker, and Spotify. If you want to watch us, you can watch on Facebook or YouTube if you're listening to the podcast. You can also contact us via Instagram. And if you want to talk to me, you can reach me at mike@thesedatedman.com. If anybody out there would like to be interviewed or has somebody they would like to hear interviewed, I will ask. If you have somebody that you want to hear, that you've always wanted to hear, you just make sure I know who it is and I will track them down. So with that, Ken, once again, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Appreciate it, Mike.